My name is Evan Burns. I am a missionary in northern Thailand, and I work formally at Asia Biblical Theological Seminary. Non-formally, I work with various Hill Tribes churches and pastors, and I specifically focus on training pastors and translating materials into their languages so that they can raise up a godly generation behind them. I am the director of Frontier Dispatch, and that's the ministry through which I do all those things. I love living here with my family, Dow and Elijah and Isaiah, and we've been here in Thailand since 2012. My life is centered in a small, remote little Lahu village, a dialect of 1,000 people. I first sensed a call to the mission field when I was 8 years old. I grew up with epilepsy, and one night I was having a seizure, laying in my bed, waiting out a migraine, and I was listening to the story of Jim Elliot on the radio. Him devoting his life to reach the people of the Aka Indian tribe. And I remember thinking, if God is gracious and He grants me life beyond my childhood, that's what I want to do with my life. I want to give my life to the unreached, to the Bibleless peoples, to the undiscipled. And I'm here in northern Thailand, and I wouldn't want to be anywhere else, and I thank God for the calling He's given me. Thailand is a Buddhist kingdom, and that sets up so many challenges. One of those is that they are very resistant to the gospel. They pride themselves on having never been truly colonized or converted to Western or outside religion. What Buddhism does, because it infiltrates everything in society, is it sets up this karmic filter or grid or framework through which they see all of life. There's such a heaviness, a resolve that life is not necessarily going to improve, and then the afterlife, the reincarnated life, isn't going to necessarily be better. So there's kind of a sense of dread that they can never be good enough. They do not find Buddhism to be liberating or inspiring or freeing. It's actually chains, it's shackles, it's bondage. Cutting through that with the good news of the gospel of grace in Jesus Christ is a very difficult task, but it's a very life-giving task, because when they get it, the lights come on and they see for the first time, like the old hymn says, my chains are gone, I've been set free, I rose, went forth, and followed thee. And when they respond to the gospel, it's powerful, and it's immediate, and it's life-giving and hope-giving. On the micro level, I work particularly with Hill Tribes people who are not technically Thai. They're in a lower caste. You're born Aka, you're born Lahu, you're born Karen, and you're always going to be that way. With those people, they're not so much resistant to the gospel. There's confusion with the gospels, confusion of law and grace. There's a lot of merging what God has required in the law and what God has provided in the gospel. As with all of us, it's a very human problem, but it's especially accentuated in some of these villages because they have no resources. Many of them don't even understand their own Bible translations, so they often will choose to read another Bible translation that's not their heart language. So you have to give them resources that help carefully, sensitively undo their old thinking and show them how to find Christ in the scriptures. Two great stories about how God has used some of our resources. In one country, I was teaching a class, and I had one pastor, he came up to me and he said, I think I was born again today. I've been a pastor for 20 years and I've never heard of receiving Christ through grace alone. We've always trusted in doing our best and God does the rest. We've always added on to what God does for us solely in Jesus Christ. Another example is a pastor in a far-flung village put into practice my lessons on faith alone, grace alone, Christ alone, Scripture alone. He emailed me a couple weeks later and said, Dr. Burns, I think we've had a revival in our village. There's so many people who thought they were believers but didn't understand the freeness of the gospel in Jesus Christ. I've never seen people respond like this to Jesus in all the years I've ever pastored. God has opened amazing doors for me working in very remote Lahu villages. I get to go to places where many missionaries have never gone before. I get to meet with pastors and teach in churches, minister alongside them at their invitation in ways that you only read about in books sometimes. God has given me immense favor with one pastor in a village. He has me come up and preach in his village occasionally, and he considers me a good friend.
On my opinion, I think that the event and his family is a good example for me as the servant of God, to work for God, to do the church or to preach the gospel. His preaching touched my heart. People in my church say that it's good to hear his preaching again and again.
One of the things that God has done in my years in Southeast Asia is given me opportunities to remain in the lives of students after they graduate from the seminary I teach at ABTS. They go back to their Hill Tribes churches and their various other remote areas, and I stay in contact with them. One of my favorite examples is Jared. It's such a privilege to be able to do ministry with my graduates.
Dr. Evan Burns has made himself available to me as also to my father. He has a heart for the Burmese people. He has gone to the Thai-Burma border church to teach there. So the lay ministers have very little training and mentoring. And when he was there to preach and to teach, they said that they were very blessed because he opened their eyes to the scripture. They were bringing a lot of things into the scripture that were not in the scripture. So he goes back to the root of the message.
I believe that training trainers or teaching teachers is one of the best ways to spread the message. It just ripple effect from formal seminary to Hill Tribes to the generations. The work we do is urgent in the sense that kids grow up so quickly, the generations move on so fast, and there's such a short window of time to access kids when they're in their formational years and they're not being discipled, and they put 4 or 5 years into a curriculum project and that whole group of kids is gone. There's such an urgency to get good materials, even simple, even short materials, into the hands of the younger generations so that they have ways to access the knowledge of God. I do pray that we will continue to put out resources that affect and train up the younger generations to be disciples and disciple makers for Jesus Christ. The donations of Kingdom Koffee can help us in a couple ways. One, they can go to helping pay for the translation and the publication and printing of our materials. Another project that we have ongoing is we're saving up money to help build a Sunday school building to train the younger generations in our Lahu village. And then another way they can just go to helping our family with our various ministry expenses. So those are the 3 ways that the donations of Kingdom Koffee can help us. Join me in disseminating and spreading and publishing the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ and getting materials into the hands of people, the Bibleless peoples, undiscipled peoples.